in a sentence?
Not this, but is. This is. Where is this is to be found? Nowhere. Right? This is to be found nowhere. And yet is the only thing that allows me to say anything about what stands in front of me. And in fact, is the only thing that allows me to connect meaningfully to what stands in front of me. This is so true, namely that this is represents the what must be there to begin with in order for me to establish any relation with things. It is so true that we imply the is, not only when we skip it. For example, in expressions, when we say, oh, a dog, of course, in that expression, what is implied, oh, it is a dog, of course. But also, and above all, when, without uttering any words, we use something. And we use stuff all the time. The usage of stuff presupposes that we have already grasped that stuff as this or this. That is to say, as something that is for this or for that. So this is nowhere to be found in the thing. And in fact, is nowhere to be found anywhere. And yet, it's the most necessary component, because without it, I would not relate meaningfully, hence as human being, to things. The human being, hence, is that particular being, that particular thing that lives in the dimension of the is. This dimension of the is the dimension of meaningfulness. That is why being cannot be simply flattened up against the abiding presence of things standing in front of us. Because it is instead that that component, that dimension, that opens up any possible relation to things as things. Any possible relation in which and through which what surrounds us appears to us as things. The ancients did not pay attention to this. And in fact, for the ancients, being simply equates with the enticity with the ousia. Ousia is what? Ousia is the core of parousia. Put it in English, ousia is the stability of parousia, that is to say, of what abides or what stands in front of me. Okay?
How do you spell Tusia?
Ousia, you spell it this way. Ousia. Wait a second. This damn autocorrector. Ousia and, oh, sorry, I said it privately. Wait a second. Ousia and parousia, respectively in English, biding and abiding. Enticity, yeah, enticity. You find it, by the way, in the supplementary text. All these terms are also in the supplementary text, so I'm not telling you anything that I haven't written down. Now, let's stay a second on this thing of parousia / ousia, which represents the way in which the ancients grasped being. In order to understand the richness, the striking insightfulness that characterizes this way of grasping being, let's look at how Heidegger translated this term parousia. Let's look first instead, in fact, at the term ousia. Ousia, Heidegger translated by using the classical way in which it was translated in German, as Wesen. Wesen in German translates the Greek ousia. Now, what does ousia mean in Greek? As I wrote down in the supplementary text, ousia in Greek means the in regular Greek, in everyday Greek, in everyday ancient Greek, and also in modern Greek, ousia means the substances that one has. For example, in English, we do say, he is a man of many substances. He has many substances. What do we mean by that? We don't mean that he has many chemical substances. We mean that he has many goods. He has many properties. In other words, ousia, in the sense of material substances, represents what lays there at my disposal stably, that on which I can build and ground my security. All right. Plato and Aristotle above all, used this term, ousia, which again they took from everyday Greek, to refer to that core which grants at any moment, always, in every place, that a dog be a dog and not a cloud, and that a cloud be a cloud and not a flower. Understood as such, the ousia is the foundation, is the ground for the parousia, which in English I've translated as abiding. What is the parousia? Is the manifestation here and now in front of me of a certain ousia through a certain instance of that ousia. For example, my dog that now is laying on the carpet is a parousia, is an abiding, and it can abide as dog only thanks to the ousia, only thanks to the fact that it is grounded in dogginess. Okay, is this clear? Heidegger translates parousia with the German term Anwesen. Anwesen Anwesen is a verb, is a compound of Wesen, an plus Wesen. An in German means in front of, attached to, in the face of. So what bides in front of me? What bides in my face? Anwesen in German, in this sense, refers to whatever has a presence, to whatever we could say presences. So if Wesen is biding, that is to say, standing there firmly, Anwesen then is abiding. That is to say, sustaining this standing, staying up on this standing. By the way, I hope you know the meaning in English of the words biding and abiding. These are common verbs in English, which, however, many people use without understanding what they're saying. Think of the expression bide your time. What does it mean? It means that you must wait patiently, but it says more than that. It says that you must stand beneath the unfolding of events and sustain them. Sustain them and wait. Wait for them to unfold fully. When in English I say, I abide a lot, what do you mean? It means that you stand in a certain biding for a long time. And you stand in a certain biding for a long time in front of certain circumstances. I cannot abide you anymore. It means that up to the point you bowed. You bowed. You bought your time up to the point, and hence you were abiding the person. But there comes a point that you cannot abide anymore. So biding and abiding are the two terms that I've used to translate Wesen / Usia and Anwesen / Parousia. For the ancient Greeks, everything that is a paron, is something that abides in front of us. And how can it abide? It can abide because it stands on the biding, which is the usia. It stands on that solid ground. So my dog can keep being a dog because he stands on dogginess, because he abides on dogginess. Is that clear? So Ribot says, if something is present or abiding, his being is projected by the thinking. If abiding also implies sustaining the things you are abiding. Now, if something is abiding for the ancients, it doesn't mean that it's projected by thinking. Thinking is the receptive of this. Thinking receives this abiding. It doesn't project it. Thinking for the ancients recognizes the abiding of things. Okay? Yes, Amelia asks, does abide mean to follow wishes, conditions, instructions, whereas abide means to wait and maintain the phase state one is in? Yes, they can be used in that sense, right? They can be used in that sense. But abide can mean to follow wishes or conditions because it is an intensive of biding. And biding means literally to sustain. Okay? Think again of the expression, bide your time. I remember when I learned this expression first, it was the second year or so that I spoke English. And at first I heard bite your time. And I was wondering, what the hell does it mean to bite your time? Very strange way of saying things. If anything else, if anything, is time that is biting me, right? And then finally I saw it written down, and it was bide your time. I went to look for the verb to bide, and I understood what the expression actually meant. It means stand there beneath, and let things run on you until you have to. Abiding, again, is the intensive of biding, and it says stay as biding, bide in front of, abiding. So the ancients understood being as abiding. And this abiding as rooted in biding. They understood being as parousia. And this parousia rooted in usia. So my dog is an abiding, and his being an abiding is rooted in abiding. This abiding being dogginess. Dogginess is the entity of the entity dog. Okay? Now, this thought, this way of grasping being, is extremely insightful because it recognizes one peculiar trait of the human being, namely the fact that the human being is that thing that willy-nilly lives in the presence of things. Things are things only for the human being. And they emerge as abiding for the human being because the human being is that living thing, that zone, living thing that has logos, that has speech. The parousia, the abiding of anything, unfolds, manifests itself in language, in the fact that we say stuff about it, we say things about it, we name it. Okay? For the ancients, let me recap, being is equated, sic and simpliciter, with the abiding of things. Hence, with the enticity of things. But as we saw in the beginning, this is problematic. Because when I say this is a dog, clearly there is an abiding. However, what makes this abiding possible is the is. And the is not a part of the dog. If anything, the is can be thought of as a part of the speech. But is it a result of human speech? Or men speak because they are in the know regarding this is? Do you understand this question?
Can you repeat the last two sentences you say? Like, is a result of speech, and the result of speech is because of knowledge. Is that right?
No, I didn't say that. The question is, I said, this is cannot be found in the dog, right? So it doesn't belong to the enticity of the dog. Yet it is only through this is that the dog can come to abide in front of me. Okay, as dog. Now, where is this is ultimately? One could say, well, this is exists in speech. All right, fair enough. It is a part of the discourse. It's a part of the discourse, right? As verb, as the predicate. However, is it part of the discourse because it's a fabrication of language? Or language exists because the human beings are originally in the know of the is? In other words, do I say is because I speak? Or do I speak because I know what is? It is the latter. It is the latter. Because as we said before, even without uttering any word, I relate myself to what surrounds me meaningfully. So when I take a branch without saying a word, I take a branch and I start using it. When I take, I can give an example. I went today for my walk after lunch with my pipe, and I'd forgotten the tiny metal thing, I don't know how it's called in English, that is used to poke the fire, because the pipe is a little fireplace, right? The smoke of which you inhale. It's a bit disgusting, put this way, but that's what it is. I forgot this little poker, let's call it this way, which is made out of metal. It has a particular shape, it's all ornated. It's an instrument, it's a tool made precisely for that purpose, poking the fire in the ashes in the pipe chamber. So I was walking when I realized that. What did I do? Without saying a word, I took a little stick from under a tree, a tiny little stick, and I used it as a poker. I didn't say, oh, this is a stick. Oh, it is possible to use it as a poker. I didn't say all these things. I just grabbed it and used it. In this simple operation is possible only because of meaningfulness. Hence, only because I implied the is. So the is was there before I even started moving my hand, and guided, in fact, the movements of my hand, and my relating to the stick, and my using of the stick, and so on and so forth. Now, language is that place in which the meaningful relation that characterizes the human beings to things becomes the most explicit. But it becomes the most explicit. This points then to the fact that the human being lives meaningfully, and it is because he lives meaningfully that he can have language. So the is not a result of the fact that we speak, but is the presupposition for us to speak, as it is the presupposition for us to hold any meaningful relation to things. Is this clear? Now, the ancients didn't see this. They simply equated this is with the entity itself. So if you ask them, what is the dog? They wouldn't put the accent to is, they would put the accent on dog, and they would reply to you, dogginess. What is the tree? Again, they wouldn't listen to is. They would mostly direct their gaze at tree and say treeness, and so on and so forth for all things. So the ancients, on the one hand, noticed genially that this verb is represents a mystery. And that's why Parmenides thematizes this verb in his poem. Parmenides' poem is a poem about toon, about being. But then they didn't look at it as separate from the various entities. They collapsed them together. They collated them together and ended up identifying being with the abiding, and hence with abiding. However, being is the source of any abiding and of any abiding, but is not either the abiding or the abiding. Is this clear? Now, if we have understood this, we can go now a step further and say again, now with more substantial ground, how the ancients understood the relation between thinking and being. By now, you have clear in mind, I hope, that when the ancients said being, what they thought of was entity, was the abiding, and hence the biding, the ground for each abiding. So the relation between thinking and being for them was the relation between thinking and biding. And in this connection between thinking and biding, biding had for the ancients the upper hand, in that biding was not, as it became for modern philosophy, the result of the projection of certain categories on a matter which is then shaped by these mental categories and hence made into objects. No, for the ancients, it is the mind that is informed by the biding, by the various usie. All right. To give you an example of this, an example that we've gone through, think of what you see in Plotinus. We know that the nous is the highest thinking thing. And as the highest thinking thing is the one that perfectly tends and remains around the one. Now, what is it that it does, the nous, when it goes around the one as thinking? It looks at itself. And what is it that it sees when it looks at itself? It sees being, that is to say, it sees itself. Because the nous is the first and most perfect being, the first and most perfect biding, the biding that never lapses into losing its bidingness. So the nous as thinking is that flowing that circulates perfectly around being. And this being abides perfectly because it is perfectly centered around the one. So in Plotinus, you see what I'm telling you, that for the ancients, the commanding element in the connection between being and thinking is being. So much so that the highest reality, the nous, in its circulation around itself, in its movement of self-reflection, circulates around being, because the nous itself is being. Okay, where being means abiding, biding, perfect bidingness. Okay, but you see this all throughout ancient philosophy, down basically to the end of scholasticism. Down to the end of scholasticism. Scholasticism, by the way, let me open a small parenthesis here, something that we touched on last week. Scholasticism, for those of you who don't know it, I recommend you to go look it out. Scholasticism. scholasticism. Okay, scholasticism is the form that philosophy has taken since the time of Albert the Great passing through, let me write it down, passing through St. Thomas, I think it's also St. Albert, I'm not sure, but he must be a saint. St. Thomas Aquinas, down to Francisco Suarez, okay? I named to you three of the most representative figures of scholasticism. Is basically philosophy in the medieval age, in what we call the medieval age. This period of philosophy has reached unprecedented and probably never touched again peaks of speculation regarding what an entity is. So it's not to be overlooked, even though unfortunately there is a habit of overlooking this period in the history of philosophy. And why am I opening this parenthesis on scholasticism? Because as I told you already last week, all the terminology that we use today, even in common language, namely words such as reality, object, subject, actually, actuality, act, and so on and so forth, entity, okay? All these words, all this vocabulary that sounds so familiar to us has been shaped in Latin during scholasticism. And then it is through the last developments of scholasticism, which take a full shape in the work of Francisco Suarez, the Spanish philosopher. It is through the last manifestations of scholasticism that modern philosophy emerges in Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, and all the singing company. In other words, Descartes takes his vocabulary from scholasticism. Hence, Descartes' mind is fully informed by problems, by words, by approaches that had been developed throughout the course of 500-600 years within scholasticism. It's an extremely important moment in the history of thought. Okay. By the way, regarding this, guys, I open another parenthesis regarding this business of the history of philosophy and the grasping of the origin of the vocabulary we commonly use, charged as it is with deep philosophical assumptions, even though we do not perceive it, to tell you that I'm thinking to organize a course that focuses just on certain key moments in the history of philosophy, but I'm thinking to organize this course using much simpler text than the beast with which we've been fighting during this semester. So no Plotinus, no Heidegger, no head breakers as our two friends, but something very simple, even as simple as the book, I don't know if you've heard of the book, Sophie's World, right? Well, I'm not very proud of it, but I'm thinking that what would be beneficial for you and your colleagues is to have really a bird view introduction to all the main passages in the history of philosophy. And in each passage, to try to highlight what has happened in terms of the understanding of things and how these passages lead one to the other. Okay? So, yeah, close the parenthesis. Will you be able to cope teaching so many courses? Well, you know, that's what they pay me for. So I think I'll be able. Yes, I'll have to be able. All right. All right. I will sign you up. Now, when will this take place? Well, probably not next semester, but in May, I suppose. It depends not fully on me because I have the course ready. It depends on the committee when they graciously approve courses. Try to say that being is a fact, but to realize and actualize the fact of being, we need thinking. No, no, Shibo, it's not correct. Being is not a fact. I don't know what you mean by the word fact here. What do you mean by the word fact?
I mean, like being is there, like is a reality. How do I say that? Like it's confirmed that you are being, but to realize that you are actually being, you need to think.
Oh yes, I mean, in that sense, yes. I mean, being is independent of our willing, right? It's not that. Think of it this way. Think of it this way. Can you tell yourself, oh, now I stop relating to things meaningfully and I fall out of meaningfulness? Can you tell that to yourself? Can you do that?
No.
No, you can't, right? Well, in a way, one could argue that there are spiritual thoughts, above all in the East, that try to do that. I suppose that much of Buddhism, above all in its Zen version, is the attempt to fall out of meaningfulness. And yet, in order for you to fall out of meaningfulness, you must really mean it. So you end up with circulating around the edges of a circle that you cannot breach, right? So being, yes, if by fact you understand something that is given and doesn't depend on us, yes. And if by actualize you mean that it emerges, that it it manifests itself fully in thinking, yes, in that sense, yes. But we must now be careful what we call thinking, right? Thinking, how does it manifest itself chiefly? We said it before, in language. Language is that place in which the dimension of meaningfulness, that is to say being, manifests itself fully. And language is the house of being, as Heidegger says, in the sense that in it, being can manifest itself in all its, let's say, potentials, in all its possibilities. Last week, you referred to the tree as a bunch of atoms. And for you, that definition went per se, went without further thought, right? And I showed you how that definition, saying that the tree is a bunch of atoms, already presupposes a certain understanding of being, right? An understanding of being determined by mathematical, geometrical principles and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Think of someone that instead looks at that same tree, and the first thing it sees in it is the home of some kind of deity. There are entire human cultures that have done that. If you read, for example, Seneca, the ancient Roman philosopher, he says that he was always in awe when walking through the woods because he could perceive the presence of the gods. Or when you read Tacitus, who describes the German people of his time, so when they were still barbarians, he says, oh, the Germans look at any and every tree as the abiding place, as the abode of gods, right? So these people, if you ask them, what is a tree? Oh, they will tell you the house of a god. This is to say what? That in human language, which is the house of being, there are many rooms. Many rooms. And being can inhabit them all. And if being inhabits them all, it means that the human being inhabits them all, because the human being belongs to being. Thinking belongs to being. So what is the risk that the human being, that thinking runs constantly? That of closing itself up in just one room. That's of, confining itself up in just one room of this big house. That's the risk. And that's the risk that Heidegger wants to avoid. But more and more, we are getting entrenched in the risk that now, more than a risk, has become a fact of confining ourselves in one room. That is saying, one only possibility given by this spacious house that is language. Okay? Then, Yunshung, and then koans. What is koans?
Basically, it's a saying which comprises some paradoxical statement that cannot be grasped conventionally.
Oh yeah, but I mean, that doesn't mean that you get out of meaning. It means that you flip the conventional received sense of a thing or a phrase or whatever. In other words, it's something that sheds more light on that part of meaning that so far had remained in the darkness because obtruded by an established way of thinking. But it doesn't get out of meaning. This thing of getting out of meaning, which basically equates with getting out of language, is something that also Wittgenstein understood as impossible, because he says, even if I could reach the limits of language, it would be like climbing on a ladder to sit on a wall. That is to say, there is no beyond. Language is that house whose windows are all inward directed. We can't think outside of language. We can't relate to things outside of language. And that's because we can't get out of meaning. The thing though, as I said before, is that this house is full of rooms, full of rooms. And in fact, is a house in which rooms keep being added. The point is not to close ourselves down in one room. Okay? In any case, what I wanted to underline today, and with this I close for today, is the fact that whereas for modern philosophy, as we saw last week, the connection of thinking and being is thought of as determined by thinking, and we saw in which way. For ancient philosophy, the connection between being and thinking is thought of as determined by being, where being is understood as the abiding. Okay? Hence, where being is collated together with entity, with entities. And the other thing we saw today is why this collating together of being and entities is highly problematical. Okay? So I will stop here for today. And what I recommend you to do is to reread again the essay, how do you call it, the principle of identity, and to re-listen to this class, because as I told you last week, grasping these things is extremely, extremely, extremely difficult. It requires a lot of thought. You really must thought about it a lot, okay? And I'll see you on Thursday. Now on Thursday, let's do this. What I want to do on Thursday is to show to you how, what Heidegger says at page 1, I suppose 1 or 2 of the essay, namely that identity has been thought of as a trait of being, and that being has been understood as the self reflectiveness of itself on itself, how this can be seen already in Plotinus, okay? That's what I want to do on Thursday. However, I want to give you also the possibility to ask me questions. So let's do this. The first hour on Thursday, or maybe a bit less than an hour, the first 45 minutes on Thursday, and I'll try to be very precise with the timing, I will explain to you these things that I just said, and the rest of the time I will open the floor for you to pose questions. Okay, all right, guys. See you on Thursday.
Yeah, do you
Bye.
Thank you, Professor. See you.
See you.
Thank you, bro.
Sorry, Prophet. Sorry,
Thanks,
Prof.
Yeah.
So can I clarify with you when is the due date for the final essay? Is week 14 Monday or week 13 Monday?
14 on Monday.
Week 14 Monday. Okay. Thanks, Prof.
Right. Bye.
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 Bye.